You are listening to the Political Periscope, a weekly podcast brought to you by Radio WNET. Interviews on international politics, security, geopolitics, economy and more, every Thursday at 7 p.m. Today's interview is part of Radio WNET's project on the Bucharest 9, the countries of NATO's eastern flank. Our guest is Velizar Shalamanov, former Bulgarian Minister of Defense. Political Periscope.
First question, let's precise. What's the position of Bulgaria and what's the position of Bulgarians towards the war in Ukraine?
When it comes to position of Bulgaria, it is very clear our Prime Minister visited President Zelensky to express our full support, and we actually negotiated to do maintenance and overhaul of military equipment. And of course, the main focus of our country, of our people, is to support refugees coming from Ukraine. When it comes to Bulgarians, we are quite divided. And it is a serious challenge because we feel the pressure of information operations of Russians to divide the society, and really through fake news and other mechanisms to develop a kind of opposition to official Bulgarian position in support of Ukraine. But this is something that we'll maintain internally. Bulgaria is in full support of all the decisions of NATO and EU, and on bilateral basis supporting Ukrainian.
Are there any initiatives, maybe on government level, maybe on non-government level, to fight, to struggle against this disinformation propaganda?
Very, very good question. When I was Minister of Defense in 2014, we developed our Vision 2020 for the summit in Wales, and countering propaganda and disinformation was one of the main focuses. Not very much was implemented since then, but recently there are several initiatives to establish a strategic communication unit in Ministry of Defense to focus specifically on disinformation related to defense matters. At the same time, there is a similar move in Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I see in academic sector more and more work, research in area of countering disinformation online, and very serious statement made by the Minister of E-Government to really establish analytical cell to follow the situation in social networks and to put some pressure on companies dealing with this for improving their algorithms and really cooperating with the government in defending our information space from propaganda, disinformation, and other type of hybrid influence.
So what's the role of the president? Many people accuse him of being pro-Russian.
This is one of the challenges we face because, again, I have my experience during the Kosovo crisis where we were facing a similar challenge, but at this time, President, Prime Minister, Parliament were very united. Now we definitely have a little bit strange position of our President, who going abroad is quite European and Euro-Atlantic in his speeches, but when it comes to public presence of himself as a head of state, he is sending mixed messages, very much, I will not say in support of Russia, but being against any military support to Ukraine, being against effective rearmament of our armed forces in order to be interoperable, hosting multinational forces, and really using the instruments of NATO as allies taking care of our air sovereignty in period of facing difficulties with MiG-29 maintenance.
Today in Lublin, Poland, the Self-Government Congress of Friezas initiative starts. Last year there was a Friezas summit here in Sofia. This year it's in Riga. To Lublin today there is the Minister of Transport of Bulgaria. He's in Lublin. What's the role of Friezas initiative for Bulgaria?
This initiative 3C is considered as something of very high value, and for good it is kind of united support from all the institutions, including the president who was chairing the summit last year. Because the main message is that this is mostly economic initiative, so at least our president tries to exclude security and defense dimension of the initiative. It is considered as initiative for connectivity, transport and digital connectivity, and it is a very high priority for current government, especially to improve this north-south transport infrastructure. Actually coming from Greece and going up to Poland and Baltic Sea. The same is for digital connectivity and implementing everything that could help even defense mobility. So in short, it is very high support to this. It is considered as opportunity for close regional cooperation in the area of infrastructure, in the area of innovation. And we see growing support in society as well.
In Baltic states, but also in Slovakia, in Czech Republic, we've heard about support for Ukraine, this position against Russia, but also we heard about the need to strengthen the eastern flank of the NATO by establishing here military presence of the alliance. What is the Bulgarian position on it?
For a certain period of time, Bulgaria was not active. Of course, I was 10 years in NATO, and especially after Wales Summit was involved in strengthening the core in Szczecin, the new division in Poland, the new multi-national division Southeast in Bucharest, the core in Sibiu. So now we have a very positive discussion in Bulgaria, not only for the deployment of battle group with Italy as a framework nation, but to have at least multinational brigade and to work much closer for consolidation of forward presence from Baltic Sea to Black Sea, activating in NATO context of the Maritime Security Center in Varna, to be connected with Northwood, with Marcom. As I mentioned, to have really full integration of air defense systems and to think much more seriously about missile defense. So with the new rearmament program and overall changes in Ministry of Defense, I see a real focus with new Minister Zakov coming from NATO to have much more military presence in Bulgaria in NATO format, and we are looking for much closer cooperation with Greece, Romania, Poland, potentially Ukraine.
You were the Minister of Defense in 2014, the year when this whole war started, when Russia first attacked Ukraine. Did you expect such scenario?
Yes, to a certain extent, and I remember very well we met with Minister Šimonek in Wales when we started this process of cooperating with Poland in support of MiG-29 in order to escape our dependence on Russia. Some initial steps were made by Minister Nenchev after myself. Now I see Bulgaria is even more interested to cooperate with Poland. When it comes to the scenario that we are facing, again, we developed in 2014 this Vision 2020, and it was fully aligned with the readiness action plan and all the activities in NATO in order to prepare potentially to such scenario, if possible, to escape it for For the next several years, Bulgaria was not very active in this process. The tailored forward presence was not as effective as enhanced forward presence. And I regret, but we see Romania moving much faster with extended NATO presence. So now in Bulgaria we have a challenge to really overcome this delay, and definitely to be prepared for any kind of scenarios that will be implemented by aggressive Russian policy in the Black Sea region. And last but not least, I think with the summit in Madrid, the Black Sea strategy of NATO has to be very, very high priority if we want to change the situation.
Was it preventable?
It was not 100% preventable, but what we hear from President Zelensky is giving some clue, because he mentioned several times that if the sanctions against Russia were strong enough after 2014, and if the process of support of capability development in Ukraine was more aggressive, most probably it was possible to prevent this. I think President Putin made some miscalculations about our unity, about the strength of Ukrainian resistance, and definitely something that we cannot influence on, a miscalculation on their own capabilities to implement such operation.
Bulgaria showed its solidarity quite clearly, closing its airspace for the airplane of Minister Lavrov.
Yes, I think it is a really turning point, even for Bulgarian society. I remember 1999, I was Deputy Minister of Defense. We provided corridors for NATO airplanes, but what really made a big difference was when we stopped Russian airplanes to go to Pristina before the NATO troops. So I think with this clear position of Bulgaria, we will be able to gain a lot of opportunities to improve situation with fighting Russian propaganda and Russian disinformation. So they have to understand that Bulgaria is not a soft target anymore.
When and how will this war end?
It was stated very clearly by our Prime Minister Petkov in Bratislava at Globsec that this war will finish only when all the Russian troops leave sovereign territory of Ukraine. And of course, this has to be our goal. I think the war will finish, but we have to be prepared for full integration of Ukraine in our European community. And this is something we have to plan and work from now, having in mind that right now the first priority is to support militarily Ukraine to really push out Russian invaders.
Will Bulgaria support this European Union aspiration of Ukraine? Will it support giving it the candidate status and finally the accession process?
Definitely, the current government is very clear in such support for decision to be taken Ukraine to be candidate for EU membership. And it is not very well known probably, but Bulgarian business is quite well represented in Ukraine, and there is strong support in our business community to do more business with Ukraine.
Bulgaria is quite far away from Sweden and Finland, but it's quite close to Turkey. What's the position of Bulgaria in this subject?
I don't hear any clear statement on this, but definitely public opinion is in support of Finland and Sweden joining NATO. And yes, we are close to Turkey. I strongly believe our government is in good position to really talk with the Turkish authorities and to support finding a compromise, so Turkey to be ready not to block the integration of Finland and Sweden, and definitely with the consolidation of northeast part of NATO, I think really the main priority for NATO in the future has to be southeast part that includes Black Sea region.
The last question, does Bulgaria directly feel the military activity of Russia on the Black Sea?
What I see in media more and more is really analysis of the past, where several times actually Russia invaded Bulgaria and was really challenged by our troops, and actually we were able to win in all these cases. So it is kind of indirect message that yes, it is not impossible to expect any direct military threat. We believe it is excluded because of our NATO membership, but there is more and more understanding that we have to be ready for such a scenario. And first of all, to have our forces prepared, and second, to have all the instruments to activate allies in order to prevent any negative scenario. But it is not something that is excluded and not discussed. It is in the agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This was the Political Periscope. The podcast is released every Thursday at 7 p.m.